It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Jeff Weinstein, CEO and board member for Wise Sons Delicatessen in San Francisco. Jeff grew up in Detroit with a large extended family, and his earliest work experience started at 13, answering phones and doing clerical work during tax season for the accounting firm where his father was a partner. He gained his first leadership experience as a founding member and a chapter president and regional vice president of a neighbor youth organization in Michigan. He has over 30 years of experience in the food and beverage business, beginning with full-service restaurant and cafe work while he studied philosophy at the University of Michigan. Jeff spent 12 years with Peet's Coffee and Tea in the San Francisco Bay Area, where he played every role they would allow him, from serving coffee, managing a store, running a district, and building an operations service department and creating wholesale programs. Jeff joined Wise Sons Jewish Delicatessen as CEO in 2022. Wise Sons operates 6 delis in San Francisco and Oakland, in addition to a scratch bakery, commissary, and wholesale business. Following the recent college graduation of their daughter, Jeff and his wife moved to Sonoma Valley, where they serve multiple nonprofit organizations. Jeff Weinstein, welcome into the corner office.
Hey, Brant, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Where does the podcast find you today?
I am in Glen Ellen, California, which is a beautiful little town right between the town of Sonoma and the city of Santa Rosa. So I'm right between 2 mountain ranges, and I'm surrounded by vineyards.
I've heard of Glen Ellen before. I think there's actually a Glen Ellen vineyard, isn't there?
There is a Glen Ellen winery, and there are not only lots of big vineyards around here, but there are lots of folks who have little vineyards and just right in their yards.
I love it. I love it. Great. Well, listen, welcome. Great to have a chance to connect with you and talk about your story and your journey into the corner office. But I know you didn't start out in Sonoma Valley, so tell us a little bit about your early years.
I am a Midwesterner. I was born in Detroit. I grew up first in a little town right next to Detroit called Oak Park. And then we moved to the suburb of West Bloomfield, which is also sort of in the Detroit metro area.
And you've got, I think, quite an extended group of family there, as we noted in your bio. Grandparents immigrated, is that right?
Yeah, most of my grandparents immigrated from Central Europe and Eastern Europe in the 1920s. And they came to the Detroit area and also to sort of the Toronto area. And then my folks were born toward the end of the Second World War. And I was always surrounded by literally hundreds of family members on both sides of my family.
Wow. How many uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters did you have growing up?
I couldn't even tell you honestly. I had aunts, uncles, great aunts, great uncles, cousins, second cousins, and really a lot of my cousins were really almost like additional siblings for me. I do have a younger brother and a younger sister. We're pretty close in age, within a 5-year range. But I lived in a world of a lot of people.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a comforting environment, but sometimes it could be a little suffocating as well. What was it for you?
It was both. I think the suffocating part is probably one of the reasons why I ended up moving a few thousand miles away. But it really was a great thing to be surrounded by all those people. And, Brant, I kind of grew up in what I think of as 3 different worlds that happened to overlap. There was the world of my family and my extended family. There was really the Jewish community, which
Right.
centered around sort of all the Jewish lifestyle cycle events and the Jewish holidays. And then there was really just the secular community at large, which was really based in our neighborhoods and around our public schools.
Did you grow up Orthodox?
One set of my grandparents were Orthodox, and the other set were Reform. In fact, they were founding members of a Reform temple in the Detroit area. And
Wow.
so I would say that while we officially were Reform, we were in some ways sort of in between because we
Yeah,
did
yeah.
pull in some elements from the Orthodox part of the family, including growing up in a kosher household.
That's wild. Did you do shul at both synagogue as well as temple? Go back and forth?
We really focused on temple, but
Yeah.
a lot of our friends and family went to synagogues and to shul, and so I spent a lot of time in a lot of different kinds of congregations.
Yeah. Cool. Gosh, what a great upbringing. Did mom also work or is she focused more on the home?
My father is a CPA. He actually still works, still does accounting work,
Got it.
and my mother went back to college while I was a teenager, actually, and she got her degree in human resources. And so she's
Ah,
done various different types of jobs, clerical jobs, administrative jobs, and retail jobs. So they both worked.
super cool. Well, thinking back to those days of, obviously of that extended family and both parents at work, brothers and sisters, what kind of things inspired you? What were the kinds of influences that your parents and your greater family had on you growing up?
You know, I think I really got from my father a great work ethic. I watched him work very hard. He always made time for us. We always had plenty of time with him. But, I watched him, especially during tax season, work late sometimes into the evenings and on the weekends. And I even got a chance to during tax season go in and help out at the office from a very early age. And I think that made a real impression on me
Hmm.
to sort of see his commitment to that. And I think that's been something that I've tried to carry forward in my own, in my own work life.
Strong work ethic. Uh,
Um, you know, Very importantly, from my mother, I think that the influence from my mother is less about her work, and it was really more about the belief that she had in me.
mm,
Um, I certainly gave her plenty of reasons over time to worry or to doubt. Um, but I always felt from her that she just believed that I would be successful. And even when I gave her, reasons to think otherwise. And I was a boundary pusher. I was not a terribly disciplined kid at times, but I never felt for a second through any of that she didn't believe in me. And I think that has also had a really important effect on me because it's given me, I think, some confidence
yeah,
that I might not
awesome.
otherwise would have had.
And self-esteem. Yeah. Were you a good student?
I was good enough. I had some, I think, natural, capability and a lot of curiosity, but I really wasn't disciplined, and I had a problem focusing on stuff that didn't interest me or that I just couldn't find my way into.
Mm,
So I got by. I was good enough to go to the college of my choice. But I will say that when I got there, when I got to the University of Michigan that first year, I got a very rude awakening because I was not going to succeed at Michigan without figuring out how to both be more disciplined as a student and also to just be, take better care of myself and be more disciplined in my life. So I would say that first year was a shock, and I had to really look in the mirror and make some changes if I wanted to be successful.
Did you have some favorite studies and subjects in high school that led to your decisions on what to study in college?
It's funny. It was never about a particular subject. I did like math. I liked English. I liked literature. I never liked or was good at the sciences.
Hmm.
But it was really more about my interest and curiosity in the world and in everything. And I could sort of find my way uh, into anything. When I went to college, I had no idea what I was going to study. I knew where I wanted to go. I knew what kind of environment I wanted to be in. But it wasn't until I got there that I chose to study philosophy.
Hmm.
Um, and, you know, all the time that I was in school and I was studying philosophy and I dabbled in history and I dabbled in the arts a little bit, I did some photography. And this is a luxury, I think, unfortunately, that a lot of kids don't have today. And the entire time that I went to college, I didn't give a thought to what it meant for my career.
Hmm.
I was there to learn and only to learn. And that's a gift. And it was really a very, very exciting time for me,
Yeah, yeah. Particularly as curious as you were going into it, right? You had the opportunity to really study lots of different areas.
for sure.
Yeah. What about entrepreneurial activities? Anything you did in high school or college that earned that extra buck or two?
Yeah, so I worked through high school a little bit. I did some of the clerical work in my father's office. I bust tables, um, but really in high school, where I spent more of my extra curricular time was in the B'nai B'rith Youth Organization,
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is a fantastic organization. I was sort of recruited as a founding member of a new chapter.
Wow.
Um, After a year, I was elected president of that chapter, and then I had a chance the following year to serve in sort of a vice president role for the Michigan region. So, between the fun stuff like sports and doing some work during high school, and then also remember is part of the as part of the Jewish lifestyle, right? There's once a week there's religious school,
Right.
and in preparation for your bar mitzvah, there's a couple afternoons a week where you're studying Hebrew and you're preparing your bar mitzvah. So I would say that it's a very, very busy, active childhood. Not just school, but also with all the extracurriculars.
So the organization that you helped found, Brene Birth, was it serving the community? What kind of activities were you involved with?
Oh gosh, so for sure. So we founded this chapter within the organization, and it was social. It was a great chance to meet other kids. Um, there were the boys chapters and the girls chapters, and so we got a chance to in a somewhat structured setting, be able to have those experiences.
Right.
We did community service work. We went out and did work through our temples and congregations. I remember specifically um, doing work for care facilities. So
Uh-huh.
we would go out
Like
uh,
senior care,
and
senior living.
spend time with folks in senior care facilities,
Oh, cool.
um, and we did sports together. It was really kind of everything that you can imagine would be great for a teenager to be involved in. The B'nai B'rith Youth Organization supported that.
Awesome, awesome. And then you went to Ann Arbor, right? University of Michigan. What
I
was
did.
that first job that you took coming out of school?
Well, so I did a lot of restaurant work while I was in college,
Yeah.
starting as a dishwasher, learning to be a prep cook and a line cook. I did some cafe work. But because I really hadn't thought much about career while I was at school, I decided, look, I'm going to go start my life somewhere. Uh, I picked up and packed my Honda Civic up with my books and my clothes, and I drove to the San Francisco Bay Area. And I took a job working behind the counter at Peet's Coffee.
Right.
And, I ended up staying at Peet's Coffee for 12 years.
You're there a long time. Yeah.
And I think it's helpful for context to think back to 1990 and what the coffee landscape was like then. Peet's had, they were opening up their 10th location, but there was not yet a single Starbucks
Right.
in Northern California at the time. And so coffee really was cans of Folgers and Maxwell House on the,
Yeah.
on the shelves in the grocery store. So I really got a chance from the beginning to be part of a very new and quickly expanding industry. I started there making $6 an hour scooping beans behind the counter. I got a chance to run a store, to manage districts. I got a chance to sort of create their operation services function. And then eventually I was involved in building out the wholesale business. So
Yeah.
I think about those 12 years at Peet's almost like that's really where I got my MBA. It
Well,
was learning on the job.
you've spent your pretty much entire career in the food and in beverage business, right? I don't think there's been a company where that hasn't been the case. What kind of drew you to that in the beginning?
Well, I think initially what drew it to me is it's what I was qualified for.
Hmm.
um, that's what got me in, right? But I think what kept me there is something that I discovered very early, and that was working behind the counter, serving customers. I realized I really enjoyed this. This gives
Hmm.
me energy.
Yeah,
Taking care of this person, engaging with this person, and working cooperatively with my teammates. I enjoyed it. I got energy from it.
that's awesome. Do you remember the first time you started managing people?
I sure do. And that was when I managed a Pete's store in Berkeley, a very successful one. And that came with quite a few early leadership lessons.
You were going to say scars, right, Jeff?
You could call it that. I tend to
Few of
try to be
those.
positive about it, but yeah, you learn certain things very quickly.
What were some of
Um,
those?
I think that I think we all have a default way of managing people. My default was to manage through relationships,
Hmm.
right? It was more to kind of encourage and persuade and, to earn people's trust and confidence so that they'll follow my lead. And, that is certainly still a really important part of my playbook. But what I really also learned at the time is that there is a point at which you have to be able to just provide firm direction.
Yeah.
And persuasion is only going to get you so far. You need to be able to really balance through relationship, but also through sort of firmness and decision making. I also learned early on, Brant, that it's something that I think I kind of learned organically over time. And today we talk about it as situational leadership. I learned that you have to manage different people differently. You got to
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
figure out, okay,
There's no
what
cookie
is their
cutter. Yeah.
real willingness and and capability, and then you've got to adjust the approach to where they are.
Right, right. Yeah, it's so interesting. I went through the same thing in my 20s. I think like you, I kind of tried to manage people the way that I wanted to be managed, right? Because
For
you seem
sure.
to be a very relational person. You established that relationship. We've done that just over the last 10, 15 minutes. And yet you find, yeah, in some instances that just doesn't work, right? And you've got to kind of figure out that way. It's a very interesting area, and there's been a lot of books written about it. How do you kind of determine which is the right approach with different people? Do you find yourself kind of, trying out different approaches and kind of wait till one hits from a motivational standpoint? Or is there a way that maybe you sit down and talk with an employee and try to really understand who they are to try to figure out which way is going to best lead them?
Sure. So it's really two things, right? One is just observing,
Yeah.
right? You can learn a lot just from paying really close attention to, you know, what their attitude is and kind of what's coming easily to them and what they're resisting. But then also I'm quite Socratic in my approach. I ask a lot of questions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. The curiosity
So
kicks in.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And really what you're trying to understand again is, how much of this is just that they don't know how to do it, and how much of it is that they don't want to do it,
Mm,
right? And then why? And the more you kind of probe and figure that out, then you know how to adapt your approach. Because using the wrong approach uh, can do more harm than good. Right? The last thing in the world, for instance, that you want to do is somebody who already really understands, what they need to do, and they're highly motivated to do it. If you start micromanaging that person, it's insulting, and you're going to lose them, right?
right.
So you really have to pay attention to make sure that you're doing you're doing more good than harm.
What were some of those other early leadership lessons you picked up, Jeff?
I learned a lot from observing, my bosses
Hmm.
and kind of figuring out what kind of leader do I want to be, and really what kind of leader don't I, do I want not to be.
Right, right. There's
And
always a lot of good examples of that out there.
I have had the benefit of so many great bosses, right? And usually, these are people who they recognize that, you know, that the more that they can sort of contribute to your success, the better that's going to be for everyone.
Hmm.
And so they're invested, right? They're really invested in training, in development, in coaching, especially in honest coaching, and in creating opportunities where everybody gets a chance to win. And I can think of, got my first boss when I was a manager, and she was sort of the head of operations at Peet's. Um, she was so invested in my success. And, I tend to remember the things that I tend to remember the most are the times when somebody said something to me that was really hard to hear.
Hmm.
It probably took some courage for them to say, but those are the ones that end up making the biggest difference.
Yeah.
And I remember being a little bit whiny, I think, about all the struggles that I was experiencing as a first-time manager. And I don't remember verbatim what she said, but the gist of it was kind of, kid, you need to bear down and figure this out, right? And sometimes you need to hear that. Conversely, I've had plenty of bosses. Well, maybe I shouldn't say plenty, but I can, a few that I can think of, who I could really sense that um, that what was important was their success, and that if
Hmm.
and that they were going to get from me whatever they felt they could in order to contribute to their success, but they really weren't particularly or genuinely interested.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and seeing those two different types of leadership has had a real influence on my sort of deciding what kind of leader I want to be.
Yeah. Well, you spent a good long time at Pete's, as you mentioned, a dozen years, and then eventually went to work for Starbucks with a little bit in between. Was it tough to leave Pete's after so many years?
It was very tough.
Yeah.
It was something that I really felt like I had to do, though. Just like going to California and starting fresh was important. I felt like, look, I've been in this one organization for a long time. I sort of don't know what I don't know. It may not have been the smartest financial decision for me at the time, but it really kind of put me out there into the world. And I honestly don't believe that I could have done the job that I've done more recently running Vitalogent uh, if I had not gone through that experience at
Mm.
Starbucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
At Pete's, we were kind of figuring things out as we went. At Starbucks, you really learn the disciplines of the business. So I learned a lot about the sort of day-to-day disciplines of achieving that level of quality and consistency. And then also, and this is, I think, one of the reasons why Starbucks is truly a world-class organization, right? Which is that they have a mission, they have values, and they do a great job tying everything that they say and they do back to that mission and values. And that was a lesson that I carried forward into my time at Jamba and at Vitalogen.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that because that's kind of an interesting transition. You started with the mothership and then you went to the franchises, right? Is that kind of how Jamba to Intelligent transpired?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I came into Jamba in 2007, right around the time that the mortgage bubble burst.
Economy was
So
melting
I went
down.
through a couple very, very challenging years in which we did a lot of restructuring, and really we had to save the company at that time,
Hmm.
um, which was again a really important experience to go through. Um, and we started to experience some success, and the sales were growing, the company was becoming profitable. But there was a point around 2014 when Jamba Corporate decided, hey, we're going to transition to a more of an asset light model,
Hmm.
and where we currently own and operate a lot of our own stores. Uh, we're going to sell these units to franchisees, and we're really going to focus on being a franchisor and let the operators operate the stores.
Hmm.
So I had the benefit of working with the person who I think was the best franchisee in the Java system, and I built a relationship with him. I had sort of earned his trust and confidence. And when a group of investors said, "Hey, we want to be Java's largest franchisee. We want to buy this package of 75 stores in Northern California," they came to me and they said, "Hey, would you be interested in being our operator?"
Hmm.
And I jumped at the chance. I mean, it didn't even take me a day to decide. I wanted to work. I wanted to work with this particular individual, and I wanted to be in charge of a P&L. I had gotten a taste of it again the year prior when we bought back our Chicago locations, and I ran those locations and sort of turned them around, and sort of took all those years of operation support experience where I'm, supporting an 800 plus store domestic organization, supporting these international franchisees. But it wasn't my P&L per se.
Right.
Uh, and I got a taste for it. And when I got the chance to do it with Vitalogen, there was just no question in my mind that it was the right thing to do.
And then you eventually succeeded that colleague as the CEO. Is that correct?
I did. I
Yeah.
became CEO of Vitalogen in January of 2020. And we were
Wow.
hitting on all cylinders. I mean,
Interesting times once again.
that's right. 12 months later, I went through probably the single most interesting experience of my professional career.
Hmm.
Uh, so I led Vitalogen as its CEO through the pandemic. Uh, Frightening time, exciting
Yeah.
time in a lot of ways, having to figure out how are we going to do this. Um, and, you know, I learned some really important leadership lessons during that period of time. I mean, I already understood the importance of, mission and values and tying everything we do back to those values. I learned the importance of who you're working with, right? Because I had the benefit at that time, Brant, of working with business partners whose values were aligned with mine, which meant that there was never any question that I could do what I needed to do on behalf of the safety of my employees and my guests,
Hmm.
which was great to be able to do that. I also learned uh, the importance of somebody making the tough decisions and standing behind them. Right, early on during the pandemic, if you talk to one group of people, they would say, "Are you out of your mind? You need to shut these stores down. It's not safe."
Right.
Right? And you get called a lot of things if you don't do that. On the other hand, there are a lot of employees, not to mention shareholders, they're relying on that paycheck, they're relying on this job. And so, someone sometimes has to make the decision that some people are going to love and other people are going to hate, but somebody's got to make the call and they need to do it with confidence.
Hmm. Yeah. Fantastic. And so you left there at beginning of 2022, so about a couple of years as a CEO, but almost 7 years in total with Vitigen. What kind of led to that decision? Did you relocate as well? Did you leave the Bay Area?
So I lived for a few decades in Oakland, which is really not that far from where I am right now, and I
Right.
still do quite a lot of work down there. Um, the move came because our daughter graduated from college, and we wanted to get settled where we believe we wanted to spend the next 30 years,
Right.
and so we came up here. But the reason, the exit from Vitalgent, I think, is actually a really positive success story. So we had reached a stage among our kind of investor group where we had been we've had great success. They were very, very happy with the results, but we were ready for the next stage of growth, and that was not a fit for their specific investment objectives. And so the thinking was, hey, if we're going to build more stores, if we're going to acquire more stores, if we're really going to grow this thing, we need to find a group that for whom that is their objective.
Right.
And so we shopped the company. We found a great buyer. They're called Sizzling Platter. Sizzling Platter is, over 600 restaurants, and they're very much, committed to growth, really good people. So we sold the Vitalogen business to Sizzling Platter
Got
in
it.
February of 2022.
Yeah.
I stayed through the transition. I helped kind of get the company integrated, but I also discovered, just like kind of coming to the end of my time at Pete's, that hey, I've got another couple good runs in me here to build something and to grow something, and this is probably the ideal time for me to transition out. So I stayed on as an advisor for a little while,
Hmm.
and then I met these really great people here locally at Weinstein's. And after several months, I became the CEO of Weinstein's.
Fantastic. So tell us about that business. Now, I think you started as a consultant. Is that correct? Before coming in as
I
CEO?
did. I
Yeah.
did. I was still advising Sizzling Platter. I started to do some consulting with Weinstein's, started to get a better handle on kind of what their challenges were and what the strategic planning was going to look like to get them on their feet. We got some really good kind of early wins in terms of creating some structure, coming up with a more disciplined approach to a strategic plan. We made a couple of key personnel adjustments, and things were going really well. And so they said, "Hey, would you like to run this business going forward and become, a board member?" And I jumped at that chance, and that was in
Fantastic.
March of last year.
Now, family-owned business?
It is it's I would call it a friends and family
Uh-huh.
owned business. It was really started by two brothers and their friend back in 2011. They grew somewhat slowly in those early days. They got help from family members and friends, and so I've got a lot of people on my cap table today. But really, I think it is. It still feels like a family and friends business.
Nice. And how many employees and how many locations today?
It's so much smaller than Vitalogent in numbers, although not necessarily in effort, right?
Right.
So at Vitalogent, I had 2,500 employees and close to 100 restaurants to run. So we have 95 employees now. We have six delis, all in the Oakland and San Francisco area.
Hmm.
We also operate a commissary uh, and and a bagel bakery that
Cool.
supports the deli business, but that also supports a wholesale business, both a local wholesale business, and we're also developing a larger kind of regional wholesale business.
Can you talk about any expansion plans?
Uh, we are getting ready to open our first new location since I joined.
Awesome.
We're going to go sort of slow and steady here for a little while.
Yeah.
First step was to kind of clean things up a little bit, make sure we're working from a position of strength, which we've done. Phase two is to really strengthen the core of the business and then grow incrementally. So our first new location is going to come this September, and it's inside the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco, which I'm
Ah,
very,
cool.
very excited about. It's
Awesome.
funny, Brant, after decades of sort of being away from the big family and the Jewish life cycle, and I find myself now,
Full circle.
in my 50s, kind of pulled right back into it.
That's
Um,
awesome. That's
and
so
there
cool.
are two other things that really drew me to the Y Sons business. When I went and started spending time with them, I went to their original deli in the Mission District of San Francisco. And two things really struck me. One is that it's got this, Bay Area founded independent feeling to it that reminded me of those early days at Pete's Coffee, which made me
Mm.
think, oh, this can be something that can really grow the way that Pete's has grown. Also, it's that location in the Mission District. The Mission District in San Francisco is where I first lived when I moved to California. And I've always had a real fondness and felt a connection to the neighborhood. And so between the neighborhood and the founder-led Bay Area organization, right? Um, all of those facts, and then the food. I mean, the food is the food that I grew up with, only better in a lot of
Right.
ways. Those things really all sort of pulled me back in.
I love it. What kind of application do you find of your leadership lessons from over the years? If has it changed a lot? Describe me a little bit because it's a smaller organization, growing, which is great. But do you find that you're using different types of skills? Is it kind of a more refined model of your earlier days?
I think that a lot of it is just more instinctive.
Hmm.
I think that where before, I'll give you an example. We talked about situational leadership, right? So there was a time early on when I would really use sort of a situational leadership framework with a matrix, right? And I'd almost sometimes have to sort of sit down and scratch my head and figure out, okay, where are we in the matrix? And then how does that inform how I'm gonna, how I'm gonna manage this particular individual? Today, it's all there, but it's a little bit more like muscle memory, where I
Mm-hmm.
can just do it. Same thing with strategic planning. I think just understanding that we need to sort of silence the noise, uh, develop a focused strategic plan, decide what we're going to do, um, and what we're not going to do, and then getting the entire organization focused on those most important priorities. It just comes a lot more naturally now.
How do problems get solved, and when do you get involved?
I think problem solving is deeply connected to culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to have an organization that is highly transparent. Uh, and I like to have an organization where the things get said out loud. The truth gets said out loud, whether it's comfortable or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I like to have, among the leadership team, I say, look, we're going to meet, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about it openly, and we're not going to have a meeting after the meeting, right? If you have something to say, you're going to need to say it in the meeting. Because
Yeah.
once we leave this room, we're going to hold hands and we're going to all move, forward together in the same direction. And so it's not just that this is your chance to speak; you have a responsibility to speak. So I like to hear from people. Um, and it's also very important, though, that it's a safe environment. People
Mm-hmm.
need to know they can speak their mind and they're not going to be punished for it. And they can make a mistake and not be punished for it. Because you need people, and especially in an organization like this, you need them to be able to take risks.
Yeah.
And if they're living in fear of making a mistake, then they're just not going to take risks. So I think transparency is really important. I do want to hear from people. I want their honest opinion. I want their input. Uh, However, at the end of the day, sometimes I just have to make the decision, right?
Right.
And once that decision's made, it's made and we move forward together.
Was that a different workplace culture than the people there had been used to? And if so, how'd you kind of implement that change?
Yeah, I would say that they were working very hard, uh, but they were kind of going in a lot of different directions at the same
Mm.
time.
Yeah.
So what was different for them was the ability to focus and also the ability to say no sometimes and to say, look, this thing is a distraction. It's not one of the top priorities. So we can actually say no, we're not going to do this right now.
Rather than, going on with the illusion, as you said, having the meeting after the meeting. No, here's what we're really
Exactly
going to
right.
do.
And that part was a cultural change for
Yeah,
them.
I
There was a lot
imagine.
of chatter,
Yeah.
right? There was just a lot of chatter, and that chatter is a distraction. And candidly, sometimes, Brant, sometimes what you need to do to change a culture is you need to identify who's in and who's not,
That's right.
who's going to contribute to this thing and who's not. And if someone's not going to contribute or be able to contribute, then in a fair and respectful way, you need to help them to understand, that they're not uh, they're not a good fit for this organization at this time, and you find a really good, respectful way to help them exit the company.
On the bus or not, and in the right seat if they are.
That's right. That's right.
What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire at Ysense?
This is such an interesting question for me. I think the way that I approach investing in people and who I invest in is also the reason why I am not good at interviewing. um, so I I have a tendency to believe that as long as someone is willing and if they have integrity, right, then they're worth investing in. And it might be that the investment is going to have slow and incremental results. It might be that they're going to take leaps forward. But I really believe that everybody is worth investing in if they're, if they're honest and if they actually want, to make the effort. Um, the reason I say that maybe why I'm not great at interviewing, is that I think I tend to be overly optimistic about people. And so I see most people as someone who, I can do something with, who I can help, who I can invest in. Uh, and so anytime we're in a situation where we do need to interview somebody from outside the company for a position, I will always get a couple of other key people involved in that process as a check on my own judgment. But really, the way that I think about investment is that I think it's the key to good retention, right? So I try to build organizations where we're committed to training, we're committed to coaching, we're committed to feedback, we're committed to really putting their interests first, uh, because I think in the end it ends up paying off best for everybody that way, and people will stick with you longer. I think that was really borne out at Vitaligent, where over 90% of the leadership at Vitaligent were people we developed internally.
Yeah, always the best strategy. Jeff, you've been very, very generous with your time. We always have one last question we ask all our CEO guests, and that's what career and life advice would you have someone maybe who's, 10, 15 years behind you, but has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
I think it was only at Vitaligent when I first specifically decided, you know what, I think I want that that top job. The reason being that I think I realized that in order to realize the vision of what I wanted to accomplish, I was going to have to be in the position to be the decision maker and to guide it. I think up until that point, it was a little bit more organic as I took on more and more responsibility. What I would say though, if you do aspire to that position, is that in order to get there, there are going to so we all work hard. I think sometimes we all go through long stretches where we kind of put our head down and we're learning, we're gaining experience, we're grinding. Uh, but there are going to be moments, right? Moments where an opportunity presents itself, or moments when you can create the opportunity where you need to maybe go from this more methodical approach to one that is faster and more decisive, uh, and maybe in some cases even a little forceful.
Hmm.
And because when you're going to really make a significant change to an organization, accomplish something that's difficult, um, you're going to have to be willing to make some people uncomfortable, maybe even make some people unhappy. And those people may be people with a title or a position that's bigger than yours. So what I would say is that if you really want it, you got to, you kind of got to bear down and, you know, uh, have confidence in yourself and dive in, even if it feels a little uncomfortable.
Hmm. Well said. My guest today is Jeff Weinstein. He's the CEO and board member at Wise Sons Jewish Delicatessen in San Francisco. He loves to develop talent and create value for all his stakeholders, and he's got a proven track record of growth for franchisors, franchisees, and independent brands. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.